Frost by Forrest Munden, written October 18th, 2005. Chapter 1. 500-Year Storm. The weather is forever changing for reasons not in our control. Some scientists claim that the Earth is simply going through one of its natural cycles. Others proclaim that the Earth is being smothered by fossil fuels, by man's continual assault on our helpless planet. But some of us know differently. Just a few know the truth. And this truth is kept silent and has only been whispered to mere mortals as legend. Every winter the world unbeknowingly witnesses a war that stretches across the entire globe, that rages within Earth's poles. This war has been waging since the beginning of time itself, and has taken uncountable numbers of souls as it rages with its unpredictable, unforgiving nature. Once every 100 years or so, the Earth enters a cycle that contains some of the most menacing weather ever recorded, creating what we call today a 100-year storm. This storm will be different, far different. For this is the year of the 500-year storm. One that places man on the edge of extinction, tests his will to survive. A storm that creates religions and folklore, creates believers in gods and mythology. One that separates continents using rivers as cutting torches and oceans erasers. This war is upon us now, and has already been set in motion nearly 2 decades ago. For we have entered an unstable time. The tides have turned, and the summer threatens to rule the world until all that is made of ice turns to fire. A cozy cabin, approximately 10 miles west of the Alaskan town of Valdez, lays a brownish, low-heeled ranch home. The rustic cabin sits near the base of an enormous, almost sinister-looking mountain, serving as a protector from the undesirable sun. The mountains offer more than quiet threats and legendary stories served up by any of the local tribesmen. They offer a comfort specifically chosen by its long-time residents, and even more so, a privacy and seclusion any mountain hermit would be envious of. The surrounding forests covering the nearby mountains are dark, dense, and unwelcoming. The trees most closest in proximity to the home posture themselves in a feeble attempt to overtake the encroaching cabin. 2 of the oldest trees stand across from the home on a smaller snow-covered hill. The trees stand as guardians of the valley, watching with reluctance, waiting with the hopes to see one more summer. Both trees have limited growth, and their trunks resemble that of bonsai trees, bent away from the house they watch over. Their branches are broken, their stump bases are thickened and scarred as they have earned their place to live where lesser trees have failed. If the 2 trees could speak, they would testify to the wickedness and severity of previous storms that only they and 3 others have seen before. The trees know the true power of the winds that blow so vigorously, so relentlessly here. The locals refer to this area as the Frost Valley, and do not come here during the winter months. The Native Americans dare never to tread in this valley, for they say it is where the Blue lives, and where Father Death will someday meet his end. Surrounding the over 100-acre ranch, along an unmaintained gravel road, stands a white, well-preserved ranch-style wood fence. Access to the driveway is provided by a break in the fence line at a midpoint in the property. The magnificent and old blocks support a giant wooden arch that reads Frost, looming high above the entranceway, following back to a long driveway that stretches back on a curve, barely revealing the home of the Frost family. On closer inspection, one can see that the house is quite different than that of any home in the area, or in the world, for that matter. The cabin windows were not only wide, providing an incredible view of the valley and the roadway that sits off in the distance, but they were also incredibly thick as bank windows, or twice that of a commercial fish aquarium. Along the back side of the house was an array of no less than 7 air conditioners, compressors, and other mechanisms that would normally be used in commercial manufacturing, or perhaps giant freezers used to keep vast amounts of meat cool. Even further back outside the home, the Frosts had an enormous, snow-covered steel barn housing 2 giant diesel compressors and 2 1,000-gallon fuel storage tanks of diesel and propane. Stacked between the trees at the tree line adjoining the backyard was a massive wood pile, 6 feet tall by 5 feet wide and at least 50 yards long, of the richest, hardest woods only found in the lower laying meadows, not too far from the Frost Valley. The walls of the home were by no means conventional, for they had to be thick enough to retain the vast amounts of cool air used to keep the house at freezing or below. The outside of the cabin had an old-fashioned rustic look, but inside was modern from a technological standpoint. The large living room dominated the front of the house, and lent a magnificent view of the Frost Valley, with its tremendous openings and thick windows stretching across the face of the cabin. The walls of the cabin throughout were brushed nickel and various types of polished steel tarnished by frost accumulation at most of their edges. At the top of the walls that pumped in refrigerated air near the openings, most of the furniture had a modern look and was made of steel articulated and crafted to be comfortable, and of course manufactured to meet the modern technological attributes the home exuded. The house looked normal as far as necessities go. A television, chairs, bookshelves, family pictures on the walls, the works. There wasn't a freezer, of course. None was needed. Just shelves that kept meats and other varieties of food frozen as needed. The house did contain a refrigerator, but it was not plugged in. It was set up to protect food from freezing while sitting in the house. Several metallic black spots covered with glass could be found around the home. Each had a touch screen that activated heating elements from within the black discs. In the dining room adjoining the living room, a heavy steam plumed from a warm, freshly made cup of coffee. Many other warning devices and various insulators could be found on electronic equipment, or anything else for that matter that may be susceptible to Arctic temperatures. From the center of the living room was a long hallway that led to the back of the home. The bedroom doors that met the hallway each had a heavy, thick steel door attached to them. All were reinforced and built to hold the cold in a place while leaving the heat outside. The first bedroom that was located nearest to the living room was fairly large, and most of the walls were covered with books, boat models, photos of a man with his son, and many others that contained an elderly man alone with a woman in her 20s. On the wall opposite of the window was a giant steel bookcase that ran from the floor to the ceiling. It was illuminated by the afternoon sunlight that was beaming across the room. The same elderly man in the photos was standing with his hands clasped behind his back, as he admired the detail in an abundance of miniature ice castles that sat on the cool glass display window. The castles sat on the shelves like trophies from a forgotten past. The old man mumbled to himself as he more closely examined one particular castle. He scratched away some of the frost to better his view of the icy miniature. He giggled to himself and mumbled again indistinguishably. The old man was of an average build, slightly hunched over at his upper back, most likely a taller man in his prime. His hair was wavy and white, not grey, pure white, without a doubt equal to the snow that now dusted his window ledge, now with less vigour than the previous month. The old man's crystal blue eyes bobbed to stay open like a child in need of his sleep. His tired body rocked to the left and right as he fought to maintain what looked to be a spontaneous, drunken stupor. He shut his eyes and smiled, giggling when he opened to regain his focus on the castle, once again lightly tapping on the glass with his index finger. Shuffling his feet, the man slowly turned to his bed in the corner of the room. The exhausted, gentle man continued his shuffle over towards a clear block of ice, shaped to a sort fitting a twin bed. The old man paused for a minute as he glanced out of the window. He whispered with concern as he gazed a concentrated stare. "I told you, son. Come home. Come home, son." He continued his march to the bed, yawning all the way. Standing next to the bed, he removed his light jacket. In a half-hearted, lazy attempt, the elderly man tried to reach the coat rack on the corner of the room. The jacket was no further than arm's length from him, and ridiculously further still was the coat rack. The man turned back towards his bed again and struggled to remove his white t-shirt. It may as well have been a straitjacket, but with one final attempt he managed to get it off his head. The shirt instantly fell to the floor. The old man grumbled as he removed what looked to be some sort of bedding covering the top of his ice bed. "Oh, girlie, you know better than that." The man climbed onto the ice block in nothing more than his underwear. The old fellow lay on his back and began to sing a song to himself, all the while with a smile on his face. His song slowly faded to a whisper, and then silence as he fell into a deep coma. From down the hall a woman's voice shouted, but the walls and ice together worked to baffle her efforts. "Dad, did you say something?" She paused for a second while folding a massive pile of clothes on her bed. The room she occupied was different from the others. Inside was a luxurious queen-size bed, TV, a dresser, and beautifully oak-stained walls. All the furniture looked to be wood and of more conventional design. She stood working in front of a massive wall heater that vigorously blew at her back, exciting much-needed goosebumps to the back of her neck. The opposite corner of the room was a cosy fireplace, equipped with internal fans that hummed along, cranking out heat with maximum efficiency. Her room was like no other, a toasty 70 degrees as compared to the 20s and 30s granted in the other quarters. She stopped folding the clothes irritatedly and shouted again, "Dad? You okay?" This time shouting the words a little louder with the intent of sending her voice a little further down the hall. Frustrated by the silence, she exhaustedly blew her hair from the front of her face. "Damn it, Dad," she lovingly muttered. She looked over at the corner of the room, all the while continuing to fold hastily, yet neatly, as only women can do. Her beautiful green eyes squinted as she attempted to read the tiny digital numbers on the clock at the other side of the room. Time was of great importance to her. To add to her business, her cell phone rang out. She cocked her head to one side, attempting to locate its position from within the room, or perhaps at a great distance, somewhere. She struggled to pull it from her pocket, with its depth and placement within her double insulated pants pocket, beautifully trimmed with dyed pink cotton that added an element of femininity. Once she cleared the phone from her thick pockets, its annoying ring ruptured the once silent room, formerly blessed with subtle crackles of a warm fire. She gritted her teeth, and with one finger she scrambled her freshly irritated ear. Her beautiful blonde hair swung forward over the side of her face as she pinched the phone to her chin, determined to continue to work. "Hi, honey. Are you on your way back?" She rubbed her bulging, round belly. She looked large, perhaps twins, or maybe just overdue. Oh no!" She bent over in concerning pain, lowering the phone from her ear, wincing all the way. She stood back up with her face still grimacing. Laurie struggled to regain her composure as a man's metallic voice was muttered in the background through the tiny phone speaker that was now being smothered against her thigh in a feeble attempt to camouflage her pain. The attempt to silence her painful whimper from her husband was hardly effective. "Laurie, are you okay?" Impatiently he fired off his standard Malay of questions that always sat on his tongue at the ready. These same questions that have been impatiently exercised by the slightest irregularities in his wife's discomfort over the past 7 months. Like a soldier nearing closer to wartime, Dad became more polished, more finely tuned, and more sensitive to daily events, or any sort of anomaly for that matter. "What's happening? Are you having cramps? Is it time? Answer me!" He shouted frantically into his phone, holding it away from his face, now emphasizing every syllable like a World War II colonel taking fire from hostiles. The wind picked up with uncanny synchronicity with Cage's manic timbre. The nearby trees were separated from Cage by a small crystal-clear stream that carved its way down the hill along the sloped edge of the parking lot. Here, nature seemed to make its way around man's constant attempts to infiltrate or erase its million-year expansion. The trees creaked and moaned increasingly with the sudden cold Arctic downburst recognized by locals in town, and scaring anyone else just passing through. The squall began shaking loose the trees' more fragile branches, sculpting them quickly into a mutated, less hardy mirror of their cousins that sat above the Frost Valley. Cage stood solid next to his old rusty pickup truck in a parking lot in town.